Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most famous maritime stories in history, but we're going to look at it from a completely different angle. We all know the tragic story of the Titanic, the unsinkable ship that met its icy fate in the North Atlantic. But what if there's more to the story than just an iceberg? What if some of the most influential people of the era were involved in a way you've never heard before? Let's set the stage. The early 1900s was a time of immense change in the United States. It was the Gilded Age, a period of massive industrial growth, but also of great economic debate. One of the biggest debates was about the nation's financial system. For decades, America had operated without a central bank, ever since President Andrew Jackson had dismantled the Second Bank of the United States. This meant the country's money supply and credit systems were largely in the hands of private bankers, like the incredibly powerful jpmorgan. Now, jpmorgan and his contemporaries, including the Rockefeller and Rothschild families, were titans of industry and finance. They argued that the American economy was unstable and prone to panics without a central institution to manage it. They had a vision for a new system, one that would centralize control over the nation's currency and credit. This idea would eventually evolve into what we now know as the Federal Reserve System. However, not everyone was on board with this plan. In fact, some of the wealthiest and most powerful men in America were vehemently opposed to the creation of a central bank. They believed it would give a small group of private financiers far too much control over the nation's economy. They feared it would lead to inflation and concentrate power in the hands of an elite few, at the expense of the public. Who were these powerful opponents? Three of the most prominent were John Jacob Astor IV, Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim. John Jacob Astor IV was one of the richest men in the world at the time, with a massive fortune built on real estate and other investments. Isidor Straus was the co-owner of Macy's department store, a retail giant, and Benjamin Guggenheim was a member of the famous Guggenheim mining family, another dynasty of immense wealth. These men weren't just rich, they were influential, with the resources and the public standing to mount a serious challenge to the plans for a new central bank. They saw it as a threat to the free market principles that had allowed them to build their empires. This is where the story takes a fascinating turn and connects directly to the Titanic. In 1910, 2 years before the Titanic's maiden voyage, a secret meeting took place on Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia. It was here that Senator Nelson Aldrich, whose daughter was married to John D. Rockefeller Jr., gathered with representatives from the Morgan, Rockefeller, and Kuhn, Loeb & Co. financial empires. In complete secrecy, they drafted the plan for a National Reserve Association. This blueprint was the direct forerunner of the Federal Reserve Act. The plan faced a major hurdle: the powerful opposition from men like Astor, Straus, and Guggenheim. Their influence was a significant roadblock to getting the necessary political and public support for such a radical change to America's financial system. So, you have this major political and economic battle brewing, with some of the wealthiest people on the planet on opposing sides. Now, let's turn our attention back to the Titanic. The ship was owned by the White Star Line, which was, in turn, a part of J.P. Morgan's International Mercantile Marine Company. Yes, the very same J.P. Morgan, who was the primary force behind the push for a central bank. He was scheduled to be on the maiden voyage, a grand publicity event for his new flagship. But, at the very last minute, he canceled his trip. So did several of his close associates and friends. Meanwhile, who was on board? You guessed it. John Jacob Astor IV, Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim. The three most prominent and wealthy opponents of the Federal Reserve Plan were all passengers on the Titanic's fateful maiden voyage. It's an incredible coincidence, isn't it? When the Titanic struck an iceberg on the night of April 14, 1912, and sank into the icy depths, all three men went down with the ship. John Jacob Astor IV was last seen smoking a cigar on the deck. Isidor Straus famously refused to board a lifeboat before other men, and his wife, Ida, refused to leave his side, saying, "Where you go, I go." Benjamin Guggenheim, after helping women and children into lifeboats, changed into his finest evening wear and prepared to meet his end like a gentleman. Their stories are heroic, but their deaths also had a profound impact. With these three influential opponents suddenly and tragically removed from the picture, the path for the Federal Reserve Act became much clearer. The public opposition lost its most powerful and wealthiest champions. Less than 2 years later, in December 1913, President Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act into law, creating the central banking system that J.P. Morgan and his allies had envisioned on Jekyll Island. The creation of the Federal Reserve fundamentally changed America. It gave a private entity, owned by member banks, the power to create money, set interest rates, and control the nation's financial destiny. Just a few months before that, in February 1913, the 16th Amendment was ratified, establishing the legal basis for a federal income tax. This tax would become the primary mechanism for funding the government and paying the interest on money borrowed from the new Federal Reserve. The IRS was created to collect this tax. So, let's connect the dots. You have a group of powerful bankers pushing for a central bank. You have another group of equally powerful men opposing it. The opponents all happen to be on a ship that sinks, a ship owned by one of the central bank's main proponents. Shortly after their deaths, the central bank is created, followed by the income tax system needed to support it. Now, is this all just a massive, tragic coincidence, or is there more to the story? History is often shaped by unseen forces and pivotal moments. The sinking of the Titanic was undoubtedly one of those moments. While the official story points to an iceberg, the context surrounding the powerful figures on board and the immense financial changes that followed in its wake is certainly thought-provoking. It raises questions about how history is written and what might be happening behind the scenes of major world events. What do you think? Is it just a collection of coincidences, or is it plausible that there's a deeper connection? The story of the Titanic is a reminder that events can have ripples that extend far beyond the immediate tragedy, shaping the very structure of our world in ways we might never fully understand. It's a fascinating lens through which to view a pivotal moment in financial history. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content that challenges the narrative, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, stay curious.